What's doing, everybody? Welcome to episode 742 of First Class Fatherhood. I'm happy and honored, as always, to be here with you guys. Thank you for tuning in. I got a great guest to bring you today. Actor Ernie Hudson joins me on the podcast today. Ernie Hudson, obviously very well known for portraying Winston in the Ghostbusters franchise. We all know about Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2. More recently, Ghostbusters Afterlife. And today, playing in theaters right now, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Ernie Hudson has been acting for decades. He portrayed the cop in The Crow. I remember seeing him in some of those old TV shows that I used to grow up watching, such as The Dukes of Hazzard and The A-Team. He also had a recurring role on Law & Order. Also, he was the warden in Oz, the show that was the prison show that was on HBO. And just a little side note, I was an extra in a few episodes of Oz back in the late 90s. So a little connection there to Ernie Hudson. Obviously, again, he has had a tremendous acting career, so it's an honor to get him on the podcast today. Ernie Hudson joins me in just a few minutes, so please stick around for the interview. And I've had a number of other actors join me on the podcast here, including Academy Award winner Matthew McConaughey. More recently, Tom Paine was here from The Walking Dead. So go through the archives. You'll see all the actors that have joined me on the podcast here. And also next week, I'll have another actor joining me from another cult-following movie, and that is Star Wars actor Billy D. Williams will be joining me on the podcast. So make sure you bring it back for that one. Of course, Billy D. Williams, known for playing Lando Calrissian in Star Wars. And talk about a cult following. That movie has got it. All right, so make sure you bring it back for that. And as always, please help me spread the word about today's podcast. Every father in your neighborhood or in your contact list, let them know about the show that's here celebrating fatherhood and family life. You guys know it. Every day is Father's Day right here on the podcast. Here comes my interview straight up with Ernie Hudson on First Class Fatherhood.
First Class Fatherhood. That is where Alec Lace comes in with his popular podcast.
And one of the most interesting was on a podcast.
Alec Lace interviews high-profile fathers, from actors to NFL players, with a vision to change the narrative of fatherhood and family life.
Joining me now, First Class Father Ernie Hudson. Welcome to First Class Fatherhood.
Thank you. It's great to talk to you.
Well, let's start it out here. It's an honor to have you here. Let's start like this. How many kids do you have? How old are they?
I have four sons, 35, 36, 55, and 58. I have, I have five grandkids that ranges from 37, 19, 16, 15, I think the one is 13. I get confused on the ages. And I have three great grandchildren.
Wow.
13, 11, and 9.
Wow, incredible. Yeah, my kids are more close to your grandkid and your great-grandchildren's ages. We have four kids. We have three boys and a girl. Ours are 17, 16, 13, and 9. So
great ages.
Yeah, I'm not in a hurry to get where you are, but I mean, I'm looking forward to down the line getting into that whole next stage of parenting. But if you could, Ernie, please, for those who don't know, just take a second to hit the listeners with a little bit about your background, what you do.
Yeah, well, I'm an actor. I've been acting for getting close to 60 years, stage, television, film, and that's what I do professionally. Of course, I'm a dad, and my wife and I have been together going on 50 years, getting close. And so that's, I suppose, who I am.
Yeah, obviously, you've had an incredible career, Ernie. And if you could then take me back to the beginning of this then, about how old were you when you first became a dad, and how did that experience change your perspective on life?
Well, I started out in a small town in Michigan. Not a lot of prospects, never really even imagined I'd be in entertainment or be an actor. Got out of high school, and just before I got out of high school, I realized I needed to do something. I hadn't prepared myself to go to college, but I joined the Marine Corps. Actually, I joined the Marine Corps in April and graduated in June. And as soon as I graduated, they took me away. This was in 1964, before the Vietnam War became really publicly known. I didn't realize when I joined that we were in the middle of a war. But after 10 weeks, I was discharged. I had asthma that started to really get aggravated. And so I found myself back home, was seeing a girl who wasn't in the best relationship with her mom. And So we got married, and I was 18 and she was about to turn 16, and that was our lives. And then, of course, life unfolds, and she was a brilliant young lady. She actually went on to earn a PhD, and I went on to college. And so I got into college and, graduated from Wayne State in Detroit, went to Yale, spent some time at the University of Minnesota, but really got immersed in theater and came out to LA and got involved in television and film. The marriage ended after not too many years, but we had two children, and the boys came with me. And I was really just coming out to LA with no real prospects of working, but the kids were I think the motivating, inspiration. I don't think I'd be where I am now if I had not taken on the responsibility of fatherhood. And now, now it's, of course, later on, my wife and I, we met early on, but I really didn't feel, I always heard the Cinderella story, and I didn't want to marry while my kids were small. I felt that it was me and my sons. And once they got old enough to get ready for college, then my wife and I married, and now we have two children of our own. But and I'm not sure if that's and as far as getting into the business, I never imagined when I got into college. My wife and I had a bigger argument. I suppose I should say disagreement, but we definitely weren't agreeing. And I got into a car, and I just didn't want to go home. I drove around. I saw this little building, had a marquee out front, and there was a crowd lined around the block. And just out of curiosity, I asked what was going on. They were going to see a play. I'd never seen a play, a professional play. And I got in line and went in, and this play was just blew me away. I sat there in tears, and I thought, wow, that is, I mean, if I could do that, that was beyond, I couldn't even imagine I'd ever be able to do something like that. And that semester in college, I needed an elective, and there was a theater class. And, I took the class, and the first day it was being held on a stage. And when I walked on stage, I just knew that it was home for me. And that's where, and from then on, I got really immersed in theater, and I've always managed. I was in '67, and I've always managed to make a living acting. I've never had to take a job outside of the business. Some years better than other years, but we managed to get by, and I've been very, very blessed and fortunate.
And it's interesting what you said there at the beginning of that, Ernie, is because so many people have this idea that they shy away from becoming a father or embracing having a family because they feel like they can't afford it. It's going to be it's going to cost too much. But I always say, and just like you did there, kids kind of give you that motivation. They give you that extra fight to go out and get more money than maybe you would have done without having kids. They give you that drive like nothing else can really on this planet.
Yeah.
And so I always say they're like these little money makers, like where you think they're going to cost you more, they're going to actually make you want to go out and be more and make more. So I think that's really the mindset that I hope that younger people will get.
Yeah, no, I think it actually it forces you to bring out the better part. I mean, there are things that I would suffer through that I would never let my kids, I wouldn't want them to have to pay that price. And I'd go into an interview early on, and if it didn't go well, I'd just go, wait a minute, let's do this again. They gave me that determination to go, no, I gotta. And I didn't want having sons. It was very important for me because I didn't have a dad. And it was very important for me to demonstrate that this is America and you can follow your dreams and anything is possible. It's one thing to say all that, but if I can't live my dream, then what message does that send to them? So it's very important for me to, and also I think, one of your kids, when they were small, I remember my son gave me a little magazine. There was an ad for a bicycle that he thought was really kind of cool. It had all the bells and whistles. And I remember saying, things are kind of tight right now, and I can't. But then I saw that look in his face, and you got to get the bike. You know what I mean? I'm dad. And so it always. And also one of the other things that I think a lot of people don't realize when they consider family is it forces me to a lot of things that friends got involved in that weren't so healthy. Um, I just I couldn't do that with my kids, watching me. And so I think I avoided a lot of the pitfalls. I remember coming out to LA and I had a lot of friends from theater, and there would be a party or something. And I think out of respect, they would come over to me and say, "Hey, Ernie, you might want to leave now." And I'm like, "Why?" And they go, you don't want to be here." And I really appreciate it because they knew I had kids, I had and I'm 78 years old now and healthy as far as I know. But I think a lot of the choices that some of my friends made, I avoided that just because I didn't know how I could say to my sons, "I don't want you doing this," and I'm doing it. So it saved my life in so many ways.
Yeah, and Ernie, I mean, I'm a recovering alcoholic and addict and the whole bit, and I think it's so important for my kids, to see me not partake in any of the nonsense that they see. I think it's the most important thing. One thing I do focus on a lot on this show is the fatherless crisis, where so many kids grow up without that father or father figure in their life, and it really leads to so many devastating circumstances, especially for the young men that don't have that father figure to look up to. Now, you said you didn't have a father growing up, but who kind of took on that role and became that positive male role model? Was there somebody that stepped up and became that father figure for you?
Yeah, my mom died when I was 3 months old, so I never knew her. My grandmother raised me and my brother, and she got pregnant away from the family. So when she came home, she contracted tuberculosis in East St. Louis. She was pregnant with me. She came home. She was getting very sick. She gave birth to me while she had the disease. It's kind of a miracle that I never got the disease, even though my brother did. So whatever that, but so she wasn't around to tell me who my dad was, and I just never thought I'd ever have a chance to kind of get to know him. But not having a father, I had men in my life. My mother's, I had a brother, my aunts, their husbands, and they all protected me. They took an interest. They stepped in. I was very active in a church. A lot of people know Church of God in Christ. I grew up, my grandmother was very faithful, very much involved in church. And the minister was kind of a father figure as well. There were men in the community who kind of looked out for me. And my grandmother was very, very protective. And I think one of the things the most important thing that I think happened to me early on, because I struggled with not having a dad. I'd go to school and they want you to list your father's name, and I never. And it was just always a real concern, because even guys in the neighborhood, kids, they might not have a father in the home, but they knew who their father was. And my grandmother, who was very spiritual, said that you have to understand, we may never know your biological father, but God is your father. And it doesn't mean, I say, yeah, well, God's everybody's father. She said, yeah, but everybody don't know it. You have to know who you belong to. And it's personal. It's not just, God, but personally, and will guide you to whatever dream that you have. There is an answer, and that answer will be provided if you just know who to turn to. And you can't trust things to come from people. Sometimes we'll look to specific people where he gave me a job, so he should do this. Trust God, the universe, and it's never failed. I sometimes I've seen what I consider impossible situations, and something would unfold in a way that I never could imagine. And people a lot of times will want to give me credit for being so creative, and I go, I'm not that smart, but I do the work. I do the preparation. I do I've always tried to be ready in the event that an opportunity comes. But just knowing that I have a place in the universe made all the difference. I never really felt that absence. Now, later on, my oldest son, through one of these ancestor DNA, found my my father's granddaughter. They connected through the DNA, and then
Wow.
through her, I met a brother and two sisters that I never knew about. But we were all well into our 60s, and it was great to get to know them. He had passed on, but I've always been thankful because, like I said, man, my uncles were they were characters, and I learned just so much from them and watching them. And there's some things that they didn't value as much, but I also knew it was where they kind of came from. I wish someone had, well, like with my sons, stressed the importance of education and reading and money management, but they were, at a time in our culture when it was basically survival. But they did stress the humanity, the looking out for people and caring and being responsible. So they taught me a lot of things, but they were limited. My grandmother, who raised me, never went to school. She was born in 1895. A lot of the blacks in America just were denied that opportunity. And I remember her taking a class. She must have been well in her 50s to learn how to write her name. So she wanted me to get a high school education because she thought that was the pinnacle of, but she didn't really understand. She couldn't help me with homework or encourage me to do homework. So a lot of it was just really being self-motivated. And but what she could give, she gave, and that was really important.
Yeah, it's amazing, Ernie. And one of the I'm a ferocious reader myself. I read constantly, and I always encourage my kids to read. I'm like, "What book are you reading? What book are you reading?" I say because
Yeah.
I forget who said the quote, but it's like the person who doesn't read has no advantage over the person who doesn't know how to read. And so
Yeah.
it's important. The other aspect, like I say, the fatherlessness that's going on also too is that we have removed the heavenly Father from so much of our society. And I'm a very faith-based person as well, and so that combination with no father in the home and no heavenly Father to guide you,
Yeah.
people are getting lost because of that. And now, bringing up your sons, was faith a big part of that in your upbringing with them? And what were some of the top values you wanted to instill in them growing up?
Yeah. In fact, I just got an email from my second son who thanked me for um, some of the, we would go to church services. We'd have long discussions about life and I'm not as religious, and certainly not as much as my grandmother was, but the belief I just give thanks every morning, every night, and try to live. One of the things that was I realize now, you know, quieting your mind enough to hear the voice that will guide you. But one other really important aspect of that my grandmother stresses, you can't be of bad intentions. If you want that guidance, you can't be out deliberately trying to take advantage or to do wrong or to live that kind of life, because it doesn't come. You have to be, I don't mean you got to be perfect or anything like that, but just trying to live your life and trusting and recognizing that God in everybody, that opens that door to you. And when you close it up with hate or vindictiveness or trying to get even or any of that stuff, it just, you're kind of on your own. And I think a lot of people who don't have that belief, that faith in this greater power, they end up looking to people to provide or take care. And when people let them down, they become very angry. They become very, it's hard to trust, because honestly, a lot of the brakes that have come to me in my life have come from places and people that I didn't even know. And a lot of people who I felt owed me in whatever way, even people who borrowed money and never paid back, those breaks didn't come from those people. I'm like, it should have been from him, but the universe provides anyway, and in a better way than I could have ever imagined. So.
Yeah, really, really great stuff. I mean, obviously, one of those breaks there, we talk here, Ghostbusters has become like it's a cult classic, a cult following for that franchise. And you got a new one now, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. What is it like for you to do these Ghostbuster movies and kind of get back into that role for you to do it and get it all over again?
Yeah, it's such a blessing. I mean, 40 years, that's over half my life. For 40 years, I've been on the street and people yelling, "Who are you going to call?" And people come up to me with stories of how Ghostbusters is one of those rare movies that crosses generations and it brings people together. I see grandparents with their grandchildren. They're watching the movie and everybody's laughing and finding a way to come together. So many movies that I've done. For example, there's a movie called The Crow with Brandon Lee. And there's a time in people's lives at late teens, early 20s that they really love the movie, but it's not something you could share with your grandparents. You know what I mean? It's not something that, and Ghostbusters is one of those films and so people will come up and tell me how it impacted their family, how they met on their first date and saw Ghostbusters. They named the kid Winston or something. That's very, very special. And I just give thanks that I'm still a part of it. And a lot of things, even with the studios that I didn't understand, it somehow has worked its way around in a way that it's turned out to be a blessing that I never could have imagined.
Yeah, and one of the movies you mentioned there, The Crow, that's my wife's favorite movie. She's constantly putting that one on. She loves that movie. But yeah, the Ghostbusters has really taken off. And it's one that I grew up with. I mean, so I'm 43 years old myself. So I grew up with the Ghostbusters. I mean, that was a big part of my childhood. I mean, a lot of kids in school had the lunchbox, when we used to have the old school lunch boxes going. But obviously a legendary movie. And then switching it back into you as a dad here, what kind of disciplinarian would you say you were as a dad with the boys growing up, Ernie? Is that different than the discipline style you had growing up?
Well, I have two sets of kids. So I have the first two. Oddly enough, they're 20 years apart. So, and it's changed a lot from, the boys, it was just the three of us. And I was maybe a little tough sometimes. I've always tried to get them to see how they're making a choice, and no matter what's happened, and to recognize that choice and realize you can make another choice. We don't have to go down this road, but if we want to go down that road, there's a point where I'm going to have to be a little bit more than you want to deal with right now. So we have even now, I think that my oldest son is getting close to 60, and we still have an understanding. There's certain things that we don't do. We don't, just certain things we respect each other enough, father, son. With my second set of kids, I raised them with their mom. And so it's a whole different dynamic because it's not just me and the boys, but she has a lot of influence and some of the discipline that the hard discipline that I did early on with my older boys, I can't even imagine. Some of it I kind of I feel was unnecessary. That's not how I raised these other two boys. And I think trying to develop them as human beings and letting them see their worth as opposed to demanding a certain thing, that it's really changed just a lot. And it's changed me as well. I think it's, I've grown in some things that I realize that, that's not necessary. And I don't want them to obey me out of fear. And as soon as they're not around me, they're going to go ahead and make that choice anyway. I want them to understand their involvement. So it took a little while, but it was always, I think, trying to do the best you can and do the best. And honestly, because I didn't have a dad, I think my kids probably, I don't want to say raised me, but I was able to grow up and understand things about fatherhood because my boys. And there were times when I'd be so frustrated from going on a job interview, and I was trying so hard, and I didn't get the job, and it's like, and I'd come home, and my sons, and they were little guys, about 8 and 11, and they would say, Dad, what's wrong? And I said, well, and they said, Dad, just take a deep breath, sit down. And he said, Rocky, get some water. And they said, no, just relax, Dad, it's going to be okay. And so they took care of me as much as I took care of them. When they first came, it was the three of us, and the marriage was over. And I tried to be, for about a year, Mr. Mom. I did the cooking and cleaning, and I was trying to do everything and do my career. And finally, I just thought, I can't do it. First of all, I can't cook. And I remember I had a job interview, and I called home, said they want me to come back, and so I won't be home until later. And my youngest son said, Dad, I'm really hungry. I said, well, just hang in there. I'll be home soon. When I got home, I got there and I thought, okay. So I took some corn, and there was a can of tomato, something. I thought, well, maybe I threw that in there. And there was some Cheez-Its, those little cheese puffs. I threw that in the pot and stirred it all up. And I served it, and he just looked at it and he said, can I go to bed? So, but they came to me and said, Dad, we know how to cook, and Mom taught us. And they kind of did, and they're great cooks. I still don't know how to cook. It's never been anything that I've been focused on work. So, but anyway, it's the best thing ever happened to me, having the willingness to take on that responsibility.
Yeah, and one thing, I cook usually dinner every night. I enjoy cooking for the family, and my middle son ended up taking up that. He's a phenomenal cook now too. But I do know one thing from cooking for the kids: they got 4 different palates, and each one of them, you can never make everybody happy at the dinner table.
Right.
And one guy don't like the meat, one guy don't like the starch, one guy don't like the vegetables. So tough to make everybody happy there. But last thing I want to hit you with here, Ernie, I love to ask all the dads that I get on the podcast, what type of advice do you have for that brand new dad out there, or for that about to be father who's listening?
Well, just be thankful that you have an opportunity to guide someone. First off, they don't belong to you. They're gods. They're the universe. And if you don't like the word God, gets confused in a lot of people, just say the universe, whatever is divine to you. But they have their own course, and that's the hardest thing I find now, is realizing that it's their journey. It's not my journey. And as much as I want to say do this or that, they're gonna find their own way. And so just be thankful for the opportunity, and just do the best you can, and do what you know in your heart is right, and put them at the top of that priority. I know career and all that, but it's got to be something. They got to be up there. You know what I mean? What a maid who can help out, but you can't walk away for long periods of time and then come back and expect, because they're going to keep growing whether you're there or not. And you don't want someone else stepping in and taking your responsibility. If you've been blessed with the opportunity, give thanks and enjoy it, because it's going to come a time when they're going to go off. My one son is in New York and one is in Atlanta. I'm in LA, and I'm lucky if I see them a few times a year. So be thankful and enjoy the privilege to be a dad.
Yeah, well said. I really love the message. It's been an honor for me. Ernie Hudson, you're a first-class father all the way, and thank you so much for giving me a few minutes of your time today on First Class Fatherhood.
Thank you. I so enjoyed talking to you. Take care. Just stay up.
Alec Lace has interviewed more than 700 dads on his award-winning podcast, First Class Fatherhood. Dads from all walks of life, including Tom Brady, Deion Sanders, Matthew McConaughey, Steve Harvey, Tony Hawk, Eric Trump, and so many more. Find out why First Class Fatherhood has been #1 on the iTunes charts. Who these men are as fathers and how they raise their children is far more important than anything they accomplish in their careers. Alec Lace encourages his high-profile guests to share their fatherhood journeys and offer advice to new and soon-to-be dads. Let every father in your contact list know about First Class Fatherhood. Available wherever you get your podcasts. Every day is Father's Day on First Class Fatherhood.